There are approximately 7 billion internet-connected devices, of which our smart devices are a small percentage. Did you know that during the past 2 years, we have created over 90% of all the data that exists in the world? It is estimated that we are producing 1.7 megabytes of data per second and 2.5 quintillion bytes of data every single day. Big data analytics is contributing towards major industries being able to save billions of dollars a year, impacting the lives and livelihoods of humans in so many positive ways. The volume of bits of information in the digital world has even exceeded the number of stars in the physical world. What do you think the impact would be if most of this data was of poor quality? Hold that thought. Are you familiar with the proverb, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy"? Playing around in Excel is a great way to learn new tricks, but you can also literally play in Excel. People have recreated legendary timeless classics like Pac-Man, Tetris, Monopoly, and much, much more. If you're a fan of Candy Crush Saga, there happens to be a version of that in Excel as well. So why not combine your love for all things numbers and gaming? We've had an immense amount of fun in the previous lessons with charts and illustrations. So now it's time to get a bit serious, but all the while keeping it exciting. In Lesson 8, we're going to touch on the Code of Conduct again, and look at more ways of ensuring that your contribution to the daily data production is of a good quality. With that in mind, by the end of the lesson, you will be familiar with techniques for cleaning and finalizing your data, including new functions. The ultimate objective of creating data is to share it. And one way is to print your worksheets and workbooks, so we will cover the basics of printing paper-based and digital copies of your spreadsheets. Clean data is good quality data. In the first topic, we will look at the concept of garbage in, garbage out, and how to prevent this from happening by cleaning our data. What exactly does garbage in, garbage out mean? It is not about whose turn it is to take out the trash, but more of a focus on what we enter in our spreadsheets that could result in poor quality outputs, such as a report. If you consider the input sheets we learnt about in Lesson 3, we used inflation as one of the inputs needed to calculate the selling price of our products in each year. If we excluded inflation or include a completely incorrect figure, can you see how it would change the profits that we forecasted in the first 3 years? This could even impact on our decision on whether to open the business or not. Some impacts will be more significant than others, but there are consequences, including reaching incorrect conclusions and therefore making the wrong decision. So how do we avoid this? It is possible to foolproof your spreadsheets, and in modules 3 and 4, we start working with macros to automate routine tasks, which minimizes the risk of human error. That is something to look forward to. But for now, we have other interesting ways of cleaning data. But before we look at that, what does good, clean data look like? There should be no duplicates, no extra spaces. It should be consistently formatted and not missing any information, and generally free from errors. Can you see how achieving this would ensure we uphold the Code of Conduct? Here are some new functions we're going to learn. Functions in Excel are divided into various categories for ease of reference. These functions form part of the text formulas and are sure to impress you. What would a lesson be without keyboard shortcuts? We always aim to produce good quality in the fastest period of time. These shortcuts are not only efficient, but also vital in navigating within our data, making replacements and completing data. We have already looked at some of these tools in previous lessons, but we will refresh them in the context of ensuring clean data. We will look at why converting text to numbers is so important, and before removing duplicates, we will identify them by highlighting them. Using the new functions, we ensure the consistency of our text data, and one of the most important aspects is to make certain we have entered the correct data type in the correct columns in our database, and it is in the correct format. I stress the importance of this as we use the data in functions and formulas. The syntax will dictate the data types required, and by using the correct data types up front, you immediately free your workbooks of errors, again saving you time and headaches. As they say, prevention is better than cure. So while I run through the demonstration, you will notice that many of the techniques are applied retrospectively in order to identify errors. My recommendation is to put processes in place that can prevent errors from happening at all. Can you think of a preventative measure that we used? Cast your mind back to Lesson 5, when we learnt about creating drop-down lists. Preventative measures are a smarter way of working, but we are human and mistakes happen. So using the techniques we learned today introduces a more versatile approach to cleaning data and is the net to catch all errors that go undetected initially. Excel itself is very versatile, as there are many ways to skin a cat, so you can choose from the multiple techniques we will discuss to achieve the same end result. Enough said, let's get practical. One of the points I mentioned around good clean data is not having any spaces. In Excel, there are various types of spaces. Leading spaces, which appears in front of your text, double spaces, which may appear before, in the middle, and at the end of your text, and trailing spaces that appear at the end of your text. And lastly, you get non-printable characters, such as presenting your text data over 2 lines within Excel. In order to remove these spaces, you can utilize a function called trim and clean. Trim is useful for removing leading and trailing spaces as well as the extra double spaces. So by entering the trim function and selecting your text, close the brackets and press enter. You can see Kim now appears immediately in the left of the active cell. So the space in the front has been removed. If we copy the formula down, it has applied to the following 2 rows. Now let's try trim with the double spaces. And that looks better already. Lastly, we can apply it to the trailing spaces. And I will need to paste the values of these cells in order to prove that the trailing space has been removed. If I enter the active cell now, my cursor appears immediately after the last A in the surname. Same with the next cell and the next. In the last example, we can also use the trim to remove non-printable characters, such as spaces that allow you to enter your text over multiple lines within the same cell. Moving on to the clean function, this function is to remove non-printable characters. And one of those non-printable characters we've discussed is the space. So in this instance, I'll enter the clean function copy it down, and already our text looks much better. If you apply clean to your trailing spaces, it will have no effect. We can test this in an example. There is still a space in front of Kim, so trim is a far more effective function to use. For our first shortcut, we're going to look at Control G, which is short for Go To. In this instance, we can select specific cells based on criteria we specify. One of the aspects of good clean data is not having any blank cells within your data. This is an indication that someone may have forgotten to complete the information, resulting in the risk of incomplete data. In the first table, I'm going to highlight my table and hold Control G. The Go To dialog box appears, and here I'm going to select Special. In the next dialog box, you have an array of options to select, but in this example, we're just going to select the blanks and press OK. Excel has immediately highlighted all the blanks for us. Now you may want to highlight your blank cells or enter information into those cells. In this instance, if you want to enter a 0 into every blank cell, press 0, and because you want to enter the zeros into all of the blank cells, it is very important to hold Control and press Enter. And it enters a 0 into all the cells. In the next table, if you are managing multiple projects with multiple tasks, you may want to at a glance identify which tasks have not yet been completed. So again, we can highlight the table and hold Control G. Select Special, and again we're going to select the blanks, but this time I just want to highlight those cells so that I can track progress. Do you remember the first error we encountered in Excel? It was the little green arrow in the top left corner of the cell to indicate that the number has been stored as text. Why is this a problem? And how does this happen? It becomes a problem when we are trying to sum numbers or use them in a formula. If the syntax of the formula or function requires a data type of number, if your number has been stored as text, the function will then return an error. If we look at the status bar, we don't see the sum. We only see count as we have stored our numbers as text. How does this happen? If we look in the first cell, you will notice the apostrophe in front of the number 1. And this is the case for column D as well. In column F, while there is no apostrophe, these numbers may have been copied from a Word document or another document of a different format, converting the numbers into text. The other option is there may be unusual characters or spaces within your numbers or after the numbers, which causes Excel to automatically convert them to text. In the event of seeing this error, there are a couple of ways to convert our text to numbers. In the first method we practiced in a previous lesson, you can highlight your range of numbers, and when you see the warning sign, select the drop-down list and the option to convert to number. Another option you can use is to multiply each number by 1, and this will convert it into a number. However, this could be quite time-consuming, so I would recommend using one of the tips we learned in the previous lesson. Do you remember our paste special operations options? You can enter a 1 into any cell, copy the number 1 holding Control C, highlight your range, and selecting Paste Special and Multiply. Hit OK, and all our numbers have been converted. Don't forget that another way to identify that your numbers are not reading as numbers in Excel is that the data type numbers always defaults to the right of a cell, whereas text always defaults to the left. Now moving on to our favorite, the dubious duplicates. It is incredibly important to delete your duplicates, but there may be databases where duplicates are required for whatever reason. In that instance, you may want to inspect your data and identify potential duplicates before removing them. And there is an option for doing that in Excel. So highlighting your range, we're going to venture into a new command, conditional formatting. This can be found in the Styles group of our beloved Home tab. Within conditional formatting, we will use the highlight cells rules where our cells contain duplicate values. Select duplicate values, and you can choose whichever formatting you prefer, and select OK. And immediately all the duplicates are highlighted, so you can inspect the duplicates and determine whether they need to be deleted or not. As you delete the duplicates, Excel will then remove the conditional formatting to give you an indication that your data is now free of these duplicate records. If this list were my source data and I had deleted the duplicates in error, saved my file and shared it, it could be quite troublesome to undo the actions. It would be far easier if I could restore a backup of the original source data. Therefore, it is incredibly important to never manipulate your original source data. Always ensure that you've created a backup on your local machine or in a cloud storage space. So should you need to restore it, you can do so quite easily and retrace your steps and correct them. Another aspect of good clean data is consistent data. I think you would agree with me that this list does not look very appealing. Where you require all the letters of your text to be in the lowercase, there is a function that performs this action. So you can enter equals lower, select your text and close brackets. Where you require all your text to be in the uppercase, you can use the upper function to perform that action. And by far the most exciting is if you require your text to be in the sentence case, you can use the function proper and watch the magic happen. All our names are properly formatted in the sentence case. Let's take a break from learning those tips and techniques to focus on a mathematical concept for a change. Have you heard of the acronym BODMAS? This is the order in which mathematical expressions are solved. This also applies to functions and formulas in Excel. And that is the reason the syntax of functions is so important, and the order in which you place your formulas is equally important. BODMAS stands for brackets, orders, divide, multiply, add, and subtract. I am no mathematical expert, however, I can tell you the divide and multiply are interchangeable, as well as the add and subtract. The next important aspect is that BODMAS is applied from left to right. So let's do a quick example. Where our equation has no brackets, we get the answer 11. Where we include brackets in our equation, The answer is very different to the situation where we don't include the brackets. So we can all agree BODMAS is extremely important in the world of maths and in the world of Excel. This is especially important to ensure that your spreadsheets are free of errors in order to achieve good, clean data. Back to Excel tools and techniques. Let's look at Control F and Control H. One tool you could use is multi-level sorting in order to find the information you're looking for within a table and to then replace it with the correct information if needed. Here I'm going to demonstrate the versatility within Excel, and I showed you in the first example of trim how to remove double spaces. We can use Control F to achieve the same results. I will highlight my data, and holding Control F, I can then find the double spaces. So I will enter a double space into the Find What box and select Find Next. And it has highlighted the next row containing the double space, and you can continue to do this throughout your database. When I need to replace the double space with a single space, I can move to the Replace tab. Alternatively, you can hold Control H to call up the Find and Replace dialog box. Again, in the Find What box, I have the double space, which I want to replace with a single space. You can replace one record at a time, but in this instance, I'm going to replace all. The Find and Replace is also extremely versatile and extremely useful for cleaning data and converting your numbers into the correct format. Have you ever seen a spreadsheet where your numbers are defaulting to the left of the active cell? However, it is not being read as text. This could be due to your regional settings of your local machine, where your decimals are represented after a comma. There is also the option to designate this as a full stop. My machine has been set to use the full stop, so I need to replace commas with this full stop. Again, I can highlight my data, and using Control H, I can find the comma and replace it with a full stop, and again I'm going to replace all. And immediately my numbers are reading as numbers. I just wanted to mention that the Control F and Control H shortcuts work with letters, words, numbers, as well as characters, as we've seen with the space and full stop examples. And the last point I wanted to mention that we're also fairly familiar with is the spell check feature, or the spelling in the Review tab in the Proofing group. Performing your spell check as a final check before finalizing your workbook is an incredibly important and underrated check. Poor spelling really lowers the credibility of your spreadsheets, and it looks incredibly unprofessional. Why risk this when you can quickly do a spell check using the shortcut F7? Did you enjoy the practical as much as I did? While processing that wealth of information, why not try a quick question? Morpheus is standing by for you. I want to know whether you always clean the raw source data. With technology improving daily, cloud storage, external disk space, storing your data should be the last of your concerns. So there is absolutely no excuse for not creating a backup of source data and manipulating a copy, so that in the event of a mishap, you can always refer back to the original, making this answer false. We've entered data, we've cleaned data, created mind-blowing charts, and now we're ready to share our works of wonder to guarantee that bonus. So next up, printing. We're going to look at what to consider when printing our spreadsheets. First and foremost, inspecting the print preview before wasting paper is highly recommended. For spreadsheets with elongated charts and graphs, switching the orientation from portrait to landscape might be preferable. We will also discuss how to adjust your margins and scaling options. Adjusting the margins creates more space if necessary, and there is consolidate our learning and put our newly acquired skills to the test. We've got a fun practical on the way. But before that, it's trivia time. We may not have seen this in action yet, but can you hazard a guess at what would be the optimal solution to get your spreadsheet to fit onto one page? The world is moving towards going green, and all efforts are made to save paper. But you can still print your workbooks to a PDF so you can share your reports. Therefore, understanding the printing options available is an important aspect. One such option is the ability to use scaling to adjust your print settings. Therefore, the correct answer is A. Next up is our demo. Let's combine all the skills we've learned over the past few lessons and create a really good quality, reliable database around high schools in the area. Do you remember the first step when working with raw source data? If we receive the file in this format, number one, we need to save a copy of our source data so that we can always refer to it should we run into any issues further along the line. Next, in column A, do you recognize the unique ID that has been allocated to each record? This was most likely performed using the autofill feature. When inspecting columns B, C, and D, we cannot read all the text. So in this instance, it would be best to resize the columns by hovering between the columns and activating the two-headed cursor, and then double-clicking. We can do the same exercise with column K to reveal the president's name of each high school. There are many ways to clean your data. One option is to perform the cleaning in a separate worksheet or in the columns next to your data. In this instance, I'm going to insert a new column by right-clicking and selecting Insert, and here I'm going to use the trim function to remove all the leading, trailing, and double spaces. And don't forget to keep the naming convention of your columns. Once I've worked with a cleaning function, I will copy and paste the values and delete the old column. With column C, can you see the mixed case? I want to convert the addresses into proper case. So in this instance, I'm going to use the proper function. Immediately, the consistency makes our spreadsheet look far more professional. Again, don't forget to include your column headings to ensure we don't lose track of our data. And also don't forget to delete the old data. With column D, I want to convert the cities into the uppercase. So I can use upper. And don't forget, you can also use the flash fill feature to apply that formatting. Next, with the zip code, do you spot the error? That's correct. our numbers have been converted into text. So let's use a quick method by selecting the warning signal and converting to a number. In columns F and G, for the latitude and longitude, the inconsistency in the number of decimals does not look very professional. In the Home tab, a quick way to correct this is to select the Increase Decimal command. And with one click of the button, consistency has been applied. In column H and column K, we have the dreaded missing data. So for these columns, I'm going to highlight the data and use Ctrl-G, special, and highlight the blanks. And using our fill, insert a color so that I can send this database back to the creator to ensure that they complete the blanks and they can identify where they need to enter the information very quickly. Before we move on, let's have a look at column I. This is a list of the types of high schools available. How could we ensure the consistency of this information that is entered? Don't forget you can use drop-down lists to maintain the consistency and ensure that strange-looking information isn't incorrectly captured. Excel will then validate the items before accepting it into a cell. In the website column, the web addresses do not look very neat. So again, I'm going to insert another column, and this time I'm going to make use of the lower function. Don't forget to copy and paste the values of your data. If you don't do this, when you delete the old column, your formulas will break and you will get an error. Moving on to the last column, again we have missing information, so you could use Ctrl-G to highlight the blanks and perhaps enter a 0, hold Ctrl and press Enter. What are the last two very key checks that need to be performed on our data? That's correct, the spell check and highlighting and checking for duplicates. So let's do that now. Highlighting column A, and in conditional formatting, select duplicate values. And unfortunately, it appears we have a duplicate record. Do you remember how to delete our duplicate records? We can highlight our table, and in the Data Tools group, remove your duplicates, and as we found the duplicate in the column Name, we can select Name and hit OK. Excel has confirmed it has deleted one duplicate record. If we review our data now, it looks far more consistent and it has been thoroughly reviewed and checked, so can be deemed as clean, good quality data. The next step is we may want to print this document, so let's look at the print settings available. In order to see the entire table, I like to set my zoom to 80%. And with our table in full view, let's use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl-P to activate the print preview. In the print preview area, you should be fairly familiar with the File tab. On the right, we have our print preview, and a large portion of our data has been cut off. If we had to print this on paper, it would print over 3 pages, but that won't do. We will look at fixing this in a moment. Firstly, running down on the left, we have our options. You can select the number of copies you would like to print, as well as your printer. And as I mentioned in lesson 2, you can also print to PDF. We're going to do that to save paper. Under the Settings section, you can choose whether to print the active worksheet, print the entire workbook, or even print a selection you have highlighted. In the Orientation section, as we have a table of data, it might be better to select Landscape Orientation. Immediately, we've reduced the number of pages from 3 to 2, so we're definitely moving in the right direction. The default is always selected to an A4 page, but you can change this if you need. In margins, you can select normal margins, make them wider or narrower. And under the last option of scaling, this is where we can make all our data fit onto one sheet. And finally, we have reduced the total number of pages to 1. I think this is now ready to be printed to a PDF, and you can select Print. Select the location where you would like to save your PDF. Now you can open your PDF